All right, this is Tom Kelly. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon to talk about our junior college safety and security audits. And we're going to go ahead and go through, let me make sure okay. We're going to go through some of the learning objectives for the webinar first. And what we want to be able to get out of this is for you to be able to identify all those requirements applicable to the audits through Texas Education Code 37.108. Also to operationalize the model audit processes, which means to us taking what guidance we've offered and making it fit the needs of your district to get through a safety and security audit. Eventually, we're constantly making adjustments to some of our guidance. We're going to come out with some new things in the next 3-year cycle. But right now we want to make sure that you identify things that are meaningful to your district as you look at safety and security improvements, things you're doing well, things that you need improvement on. And we're also going to walk through, and Joe McKenna later will talk a little bit more about the reporting requirements so you can understand that whole reporting process and how you will report answers and data from the district audit reporting process, how that's all documented. So let's go ahead. We're going to start a little bit with safety in the law. If you're pretty familiar with 37.108, some of this may be a review, but let's go ahead and make sure that we understand all of the requirements currently. Back in 2009, in the 81st legislature, House Bill 1831 modified Texas Education Code 37.108, which is the one that requires and lists most of the requirements for junior college districts as well as K through 12 districts within the state. So effective on 9/1/2009, Senate Bill 1831 modified 37.108, and they added things like one is to adopt and implement that multi-hazard emergency operations plan. And notice it says for use in district facilities. It is not only for your instructional campuses where learning is going on, but also you may have quite a few other support facilities throughout your district. And so that emergency operations plan needs to cover all your operations, all your property areas, special events, things of that nature. Also, it requires that you conduct safety and security audit of your district facilities. And note it says at least once every 3 years. The 3 years is more like a reporting process. However, at least one time during that 3-year audit cycle, you need to look at all your facilities. And the reason it says at least once, there are some that may want to do this annually. You may be such a large facility or a large campus that you have to split things up and maybe do a third of your facilities 1 year, another third, however you need to break it up. But at least somewhere during that entire audit cycle, you need to make sure that you've looked at all your facilities. Now, also as part of 37.108, you have to address the 4 phases of emergency management. The mitigation, prevention is one phase, preparedness, response, and recovery. And, of course, you have to provide for district employee training in responding to an emergency. That's really, really important because if anything happens in your district, one of the first things they're going to do is look back and see how your employees responded and how they were trained. It's going to be a very big issue if you don't have some documentation to show that your employees have been trained in responding to whatever kind of an emergency it is. It may be, a parent, the student, or the employee themselves that are going to make allegations about trainings or lack of training. So make sure you've got some kind of process to capture almost any kind of training somebody goes through related to safety and security within your college district. Also, that emergency operations plan needs to be able to be developed in coordination with the Texas Department of State Health Services, your local emergency management agencies, law enforcement, and various other departments, health departments, fire departments, and provide for that implementation of safety and security audits. Now, notice when it says coordination, I usually draw a distinction between collaboration and coordination. You're going to collaborate with districts so that everybody knows what to do, but your plans should actually provide for that coordination. So you're working with these other agencies and your plans don't go against some of their plans, that all these things fit together and are coordinated. And then, of course, like I said, providing for that implementation of the safety and security audit. So let's make sure everybody's real clear on the safety and security audit cycle. That 3-year cycle began on, the current cycle began on 9/1 of 2015, and it has to be completed by August 31st of 2018. So every junior college district has the same cycle. Everyone is on that same 3-year period. So you start up as of September 1. Any activities you did prior to 9/1 would not be included in this audit cycle, but from 9/1 on. And you have to have them completed by 8/31 of 2018. After that time, there's going to be certain results of the audits that must be submitted to the center, and they're going to be using the JCAR, Junior College Audit Reporting Tool, online. Now, that has to be completed and submitted to us by September 15th of 2018. Again, Joe McKenna will get into some more of those details a little later on, but you'll have that opportunity. You don't have to wait until August 31st to do that. You'll see those sent to you more like in early April of 2018. So if you're already completed, you can start sending those in. And like I said, we'll get into a little more of that information as we go along. Like I just said, there you go, after the receipt of the tool. And you should get the tool sometime after, in April of 2018. You'll need to look for that because that will go to your president or chancellor and or their designee. In some cases, someone hasn't designated someone else, so therefore you may only be going to the chancellor, and maybe that's not the only place or the main place for you to receive this information. So be looking for it to arrive by email in April, and that will have the password and information needed to go ahead and start the process if you're ready. If nothing else, you can print the questions off and know what it is that we're asking for. Now, just to go through a little bit more about some of the previous audit cycles. Now, remember, the law changed things that you had to do your audits starting with the cycle of 9/1/2009 through 8/31 of 2012. There's about 50, or there is 50 community college districts within the state of Texas, and we received reporting from 100% of those districts. Now, when we say we received the reporting, that doesn't necessarily mean that 100% of districts were compliant in all aspects. It just means that at least every one of the 50 community colleges reported as required by law. Now, 37 of the 50 districts reported that they audited all their facilities. I think we saw earlier in the very first cycles that oftentimes you went for your main instructional facilities and didn't get around to some of the non-instructional or support facilities. So 37 out of 50 districts during that time period said that. Okay. Now in the 2012 to 2015 cycle, again, we had 100% of the districts reported, but at that time, all 50 districts reported that they had audited all of their different facilities, whether you call them instructional and non-instructional or instructional and support facilities, whichever one you say. So let's talk just a little bit about what is a safety and security audit. The law talks about it in terms of an audit, but we always think about it as well as an assessment, rather even a self-assessment. When the statute came in, they realized that the districts, the legislature, when they put that into statute, realized that districts have the authority and usually the resources to conduct this themselves. So they made it with the intention of this being a self-assessment. It's an assessment of current protocol, your practices. You want to look at everything in your facility, not only the visible hands-on things that you can walk through and see, but also some climate issues, safety and security issues, cleanliness. A lot of those things play an important part in maintaining that safe and secure learning environment. So those, in the context of 37-108, that's what we believe a safety and security audit is. Now, I did say that you should be able to do this with your own staff. There's nothing wrong if you want to hire an outside source. You have a risk management firm or somebody that wants to do that. But our model procedures are based around you being able to do this using your own staff. There's a lot more buy-in if you get them to do it. Plus, there's a lot more emphasis on following through and making improvements if everyone that's part of that process gets to see it on a daily basis. Okay, so you should look at your hazards, your threats, and your vulnerabilities. Anything that might pose any kind of a threat, looking at areas, doing a lot of what ifs. You know, what if somebody were to get into this area? What if you know, this isn't tied down, or somebody were to trip over this? So a lot of it has to do with some risk management functions as well. But we want to make sure that ultimately that you have a safe and secure teaching and learning environment. So whatever that means to you, everybody's got their different thoughts around that. The purpose of the audit, why do we do it? A lot of folks say, well, the reason is because it's required by law. Yes, true. And the reason it's required by law is because it's very important to improving safety and security. So you want to assess the safety and security of all your facilities. Another purpose is to gather data for use in the emergency operations plan. So, you know, things you find in your audit may necessitate changes to the emergency operations plan to make sure everything is working smoothly. So, another one is to provide safety and security information about your facilities to your administration and to your board of trustees. It's very important that boards of trustees understand, at least generally, the level of safety and security that's available within their facilities, what they can do about it. You know, boards are very much sharing the liability, because in most cases the president and chancellors also may answer to that board of trustees. So it's important to keep all of those folks and the district administration apprised of those operations and safety. And then, of course, to gather certain information, because you're going to have to submit it to the School Safety Center, so we can put it in that junior college audit report, which goes out to the public and to the legislature and the governor for them to evaluate and make decisions. Now, we have developed the model audit procedures. Those are available on our website. We'll get into some of those, but those were developed for use to guide your self-assessment. So it was done with the idea that you can use our tools and walk through and identify areas, document what condition everything's in, what policies and procedures are there if they work right, and then make recommendations for improvement. You know, we recommend a team approach. We prefer not to see one person wandering through a school or a facility. It's just you only get one perspective. On top of that, if you think of all the buildings you have, and if you really are doing a comprehensive assessment, it should take a while. Some buildings may take a whole day, some may take more than that. If you were looking at a pretty extensive science and chemistry lab area, that could take a lot longer. So it's really important that you take the time and view all aspects of the operation, and having a team approach with several people will give you different perspectives. Everybody looks at things through their own lens. If you've got law enforcement, they may look at it more on the security side. Having somebody that's an actual science teacher, chemistry teacher, may understand a little bit more of the storage. You know, can these chemicals be stored next to each other? You know, maintenance folks, there's a whole bunch of different people that if they were involved in this team approach, you're going to get these different perspectives, which are going to be really valuable to you. And you can also use people from the community if you need some additional folks and want to get their perspective. Now, while there is no specific training or certification required, we know you want to use trained folks. So obviously, when you're picking people for your audit team, you want to make sure that they're that they are trained in their roles. They know exactly what it is that their responsibility is. It gets real easy to wander around and find things and comment on them that, oh, this isn't clean, this is this. You know, be aware that you're being professional and not talking about somebody that might be right behind you. You know, everybody takes things pretty personal. So you just document it. The whole process is to look at the way things are, the way things you see them at that time. We're not so concerned as how they got that way as to what we need to do to fix them and make things better. So training everybody in that role will really help them to understand what they're doing. You may have somebody that needs to take photos, somebody that needs to document, or vice versa. But you can talk back and forth about issues. What do you think about this? Do you see it? Is this not a big deal? I'm making too much out of it, or you know, that really helps. So you know, to get all those things done, we've created a higher education audit toolkit on our website, and you can find those through that link. It's very, very simple to go to our website and actually pick out tools and see our toolkits, and we'll kind of walk through some of that here in a minute. But it provides some background information as well as some of the tools. But like I said before, don't be afraid to modify some of those tools, add things that you want to look at. If something's just not applicable, I do know that there's a couple things in the audit toolkit that will be changed, that will be taken out at some point. I doubt very many of you are accessing your buildings by helicopters, so the little question about putting numbers on your roofs of, so that the helicopters can identify, I don't know how applicable that will be, so I'm sure that that'll come out of there at some point. So just think of it in terms of what your needs are. You know, you may have some very unique needs depending on where you are within the state and the types of risks, hazards, and the threats that you experience in your area. So if you go to our website, like I explained, you go there and find tools, and along those sides you can see here, this is a snapshot of what you might see, and there's a whole list of different toolkits on the left hand side of the screen. So if you go to the Higher Education Safety and Security Audit Toolkit and click there, it will begin by giving you some information. This little shaded box here reminds you of the current audit cycle and when generally the reporting needs to be done, and also will give you some information about Texas Education Code. So as much information as you want, you can scroll down and read the different portions of it. You can, when you get to the bottom of the page, you can hit start and it will go on and give you other sections and kind of walk you through some context of each of the processes. Or you can go to that table of contents, and they're underlined because those are all links. Or you can go down to that final tab. Now, but anyway, clicking on any of those links will help take you to that particular section. You want the audit guide, you want to figure out how to best create an audit team, looking at actually conducting the audits, and you know, maybe how to start writing a report when you're done, things like that. Or you can scroll down and hit that tab at the bottom which says browse and download all your job aids, and so then all the job aids will be listed on the page, something like this. So you can actually go there and get to your comprehensive review of documents, which should be a list of documents you want to review. Again, you may have to put some of your own documents in there that you'd like. A climate survey. The surveys, I will tell you, I think are very, very good if you create your own survey. You can have other surveys that as a sample or as a template, but you know more importantly what's important to your folks, what you want to get at, the audience you want to have. You may have surveys about safety and security from your professors, from your college staff, your students, you know, all different perspectives. So you may want to do your own surveys. There's some samples there. But then there's the safety and security audit checklist. And it's going to go through an overhaul. But right now, there's a lot of information on there that you can look at. Just because you see a statement and you say no to it doesn't mean you're not in compliance. It really means you have to look at it. It may not be something you agree with, or maybe not be something that's important to you. So look at those issues. You may have something else that's very important to you that was left off. Make sure you add that, you know, to it. But this is just some guidance to be able to help you get to the point of walking through. The facility checklists are very specific to the type of buildings you're in. So as you go through the checklists, it may have quite a variety of different questions depending on what kind of buildings you're in. Okay. Some of the additional aids that you also just saw in there, that review toolkit, the sample climate survey, that's not easy to say, facility audit checklist. And you know, when we talk about who might be on your audit team, we suggest you keep it relatively small. You know, 10 or 12 people wandering through a facility probably isn't very efficient. But think of the different people that you may want on your team. Obviously, your emergency management coordinator or someone in that role would be an important person, somebody who would take the lead on the audit team. You know, you may want an administrator, you may want a faculty person, a nurse or a counselor, you know, law enforcement, maintenance or support services. You know, it doesn't have to be all of these folks, but obviously there's lots of different walks of life they can come from that'll give their perspective. It's important to do that objective, detail-oriented people. If somebody is used to working in a building where there's a lot of materials laying around, it's not very clean, it's not very well organized, the chances are they're not going to be able to all of a sudden get real objective of going through another area that's not real well organized. So be thinking about that and maybe put on a little different lens as you go through. I usually use the example of if you've ever sold your house, you get an inspector that you pay for, and they come out and inspect, and they come up with this huge list of all these things that you say, well, this is crazy. You know, look at all these different items here. This one says I got a broken window. This one says it's a missing screen. But sure enough, that's what happens. We get to the point where we ignore those things. We see them day in and day out, so it doesn't mean anything to us. But when somebody comes in and really looks specifically for items, you're going to come up with something. So, you know, think about that, and they need to make sure that we're all honest about it. If it's a friend of yours that operates that section, you can't view it differently than somebody else. So look at all those things. Keep the information confidential. Think about it in terms of positive feedback as well. We tend to look for things that are not that need improvement or that are not real well taken care of, but there are a lot more things that are positive than there are negatives. So make sure you come up with commendations. If something's really clean, well organized, the people are friendly, you might have a 100-year-old building that you're working with a lot of challenges. But I've seen buildings like that where they're very well maintained, they work very well, they provide a really good learning environment. So don't overlook it just because it's old. Make sure you think about being objective and make sure that you're confidential about that material. Don't run back and start saying, oh, you wouldn't believe what I saw, and start spreading that around. You'd be surprised how quick that can come out. Okay, again, we've talked a little bit about this before, making sure it meets your needs and resources. You may have to have multiple teams. You know, what if you've got a lot of facilities and a very little time, you may have to do, you know, 3, 4, 5 different teams. And, you know, the size, again, it really determines by what kind of resources you have. So you could do teams of 2 or 3. I just don't think that it's a good idea to have a team of 1 and you end up getting in a car and doing drive-by audits where you just drive by and look at things real quick and then move on. So do a comprehensive audit regardless of who you use. Okay, one of the other things is, I know we're getting closer to the end of the year. We want to make sure that we're doing these audits at a time when those particular operations are in as close to normal mode as possible. So if a building's closed down for the summer, that's not a real good time to do an audit. Is it allowable? Yes. There's nothing in law that says that you have to do them while they're in operation. You just think about what you're going to learn when it's not in operation. Everything's different. So try to do your best. If you have to leave off something, leave off some of the non-instructional facilities until summer. You know, because you definitely want to do it when you can watch and access and see how students are arriving, how they're mingling together, traffic patterns, all those things. So think about what needs to be done. They all have to be completed by the end of the cycle. We believe that there are 4 real general parts of an audit. The exterior, which would include your sidewalks, grounds, parking, building access, and signage. If I were to go to a junior college and visit, the first thing I'm going to recognize is signage. How easy it is for me to go where I'm supposed to go, to park, to sign in, to gain appropriate access to the facilities. If you don't have signs, I'm going to be wandering around all over the place looking for things, and you know, that can cause problems by itself. So make sure that you have signage and direction, and make sure that everything's clean and organized as much as possible around the building. Then the interior, of course, is everything on the inside. So you're going to look at stairwells. You know, just think of places where things can be placed, can be hidden. There are always areas within every facility that needs a little bit of help. So don't be surprised to find things and to list them. Now, maybe later they're not high on the priority list, but that's fine. At least you're documenting, and that's what you should do, to document this and then later determine what are the important things to fix. But look at all areas of the building. Don't forget all your heating, air conditioning, some of your custodial closets and other areas that have chemicals and things like that stored in them. Climate and culture. You know, this is really, really important, and the cleanliness and lighting is huge. If things are bright, you've got a lot of natural light, but you also have other light within the building, and it's clean, and you see good interaction, people just get along better. You know, if they get along better and it's a better climate, you're going to have better learning that goes on. So hopefully you have law enforcement and staff and faculty and everybody gets along. You know, you can just feel it when you go into a school and the climate and culture is good. And then looking at your data and documents. Remember, you got to review everything. Review that EOP. If you have a district EOP, which is required by law, but you also may have separate campus ones. You may have campuses that have very different characteristics, very different amounts of traffic, other types of threats. They may be near a chemical plant or not, those kind of things. So can be quite a bit of differences. So look at those. Evacuation maps. Do you have those posted? Do they show the right information? Are things up to date? You may look at crime statistics. If you have statistics about a lot of crimes going on in a particular area, it may tell you something about your facility. Maybe your lighting's not as good. Maybe there needs to be more surveillance in that area. You know, so use that data and documents to help decide where your improvements need to lie. Okay, we'll show a few pictures of some things here too. You know, look at the signage you have. To me, it's very important to have emergency signage, because in an emergency, you need to know immediately where everything is. Just think about an emergency eye wash station. You know, if you get something in your eye, you want to know exactly where it is that you can go to and get that remedied, as well as safety showers. So look at the different types of signage. Being able to look around and see where your areas for shelter are. Also, where the stairwells, where all your exits are. I think now everyone's a lot more aware nowadays of where your exits are, or should be, in case of an emergency. You know, there's a lot of different signage for weapons at this point in time, especially with being able to maneuver around campuses with concealed handgun licenses. So, you know, these are all over the place. Make sure you've got those in the right place. One of the things I like that was happening here at Texas State is when they have band camps and things like that during the summer, they have areas where they now have minors, you know, in the band hall. So they have some of the portable signs, the sandwich type signs that are out there that they put out on the street around those buildings with the appropriate signage to remind people that they can't carry handguns in areas where there's activities going on. So, you know, think about that. Make sure you're applicable to the law in that regard. You know, just when you pull up to a facility, it's really nice to be able to have some signage that tells you where you are, you know, where you're going. You know, so those are always very helpful. And you know, make sure that you share all that with your law enforcement and first responders. The last thing you want is on the day when you have an emergency, find out that your fire department, your EMS, and those folks have never been there before. It's really nice for them to come out ahead of time, give them a tour, maybe share your floor plans with them in case of an emergency. A lot of law enforcement now has floor plans built in on their computers so they can access them during an emergency. Those are all good practices. You never know what's in a refrigerator in a lab, so make sure that you differentiate between those things for human use and for labs. I've opened more than one refrigerator and wasn't sure what in there was being used for what purpose, but just assume that it's for the right thing. But it never hurts to have some signage, and think about the different languages that may be present there. So, but look for that cleanliness and organization, you know, especially when it comes to older facilities that don't have a lot of storage built in. You tend to see things piled everywhere, and there probably isn't anybody that has enough storage space. But look for those kinds of things. Some of the occupational shops, I mean, I was pretty amazed at how nice this woodworking shop looked. All the equipment is very clean. It's got it's well lit. There's nothing out of place here. And yes, this is one that's being used on a regular basis. They just clean it up every day. So it's pretty amazing. You know, start looking at how your line of sight, you know, areas. This one happens to have some alert signs and lighting, and lots of signage, and it's very clean and well organized. I don't know if any of you have been in welding instruction areas, welding shops before, but this is amazing, to have something that well organized. But it's the way it ought to be. It's a whole lot safer, when you have, you have your welding, your acetylene, and your oxygen tanks, and making sure they're in a safe condition. They're chained. All those different safety devices. Making sure of all that. Ventilation is a huge issue. Your hallways are clean, not congested. And usually what we try to do, when we're trying to take pictures, obviously we try to take pictures when there's not full of people in the hallway because of the confidentiality and all the permissions you have to get. So these are not void of people because they're not in session, but we just pick times that there were very few people around. Don't forget to inspect your equipment, making sure those AED pads and everything are viewable and they're changed out. Those do expire, so make sure everything works right. Inspect all that safety equipment. Looking at all your different storage containers, your flammable storage. There's a lot of areas within a campus that has flammables. We all tend to think of chemistry labs right away, but lots of times we don't think of a lot of the art classes, which also have paint thinners and spray paints and all sorts of things that are also flammable. They should have a flammable cabinet too, not just put on a bookshelf. So be aware of the kinds of cabinets you need, whether they're ventilated or not. Different kinds of acids have to be separated and put in different cabinets. These are all things you should be able to wander through and notice. By all means, your safety showers and your eye wash stations, and try them. If there's one criticism I see a lot of is when you go through and you turn on an eye wash station and rusty water comes out. Remember, the purpose of an eye wash station is to wash bad things out of your eye, not put things in it. So if it's not clean, if it's not the right temperature, if one side doesn't work as well as the other, all those things, they have to be flushed regularly. And nobody likes flushing the safety showers because it's a ton of water, unless you've never done them before. Then you don't know. You find out later what a mess it'll make. But there are devices that look like an upside down windsock that you can hold up there, and it will, to test them and flush that bad water out of there. So be aware of those kind of items as well. I always open first aid kit cabinets. You may see a really nice first aid kit or first aid cabinet, but open it. You may find out it's empty or missing a lot of equipment. So a good array of all those things, and check the expiration dates on eye wash bottles, any kinds of other things that have an expiration date, just like you would fire extinguishers or anything, making sure that you look at all those types of things. And you should see these throughout the campus. This isn't only chemistry labs that have these types of needs. And then we talked a little bit about some of the challenging areas. This particular one I liked because they had actually put kind of a wooden subfloor in there so that you can't get things down in a crevice. So if you've got some areas where people could hide something, could store something, some bad activity could go on there, you can mitigate that by making some alterations to it, not altercations. If you get weight rooms, again, another area, you don't want to see duct tape holding things together, non-tempered bolts that are put in there. So making sure that you've got the cleanliness factor. And usually if you walk in there, you can tell right away if it's being kept clean, because the smell will get to you right away if somebody's not keeping things clean. So it's very important. This was kind of a surprise to me. Obviously, this was a pretty new facility, but these are down within their boilers and some of their heating, air conditioning, and steam units. But the thought to go ahead and put a safety shower and an eye wash station in some of those mechanical areas so that any of the staff using that equipment would have the ability to take care of themselves in an emergency is very good. I was really, really happy to see that. So, think about those kind of things. Even if you're looking at plans for building in the future, think about those needs. Outside your facility, looking at the exterior, your courtyards, places where people gather, do you have a way for them to be able to hear some of those announcements? If a tornado was coming and you've got a lot of people walking between buildings, they may not have a clue that the weather is really bad. And if you have an ability to get on the speaker and you have some address systems that will reach them, that will help a great deal. So look at that. Also, think of CPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design. You start looking at bushes and trees, and how can those be cut back to keep down some of the potential crime areas around your campus. You get into some of the older labs, and like I was saying before, here you've got all sorts of things. You've got an older eye wash station that's a little harder to maneuver around, but it can all be done. You just have to maintain cleanliness. You can even see a glass disposal, making sure you've got your broken glass areas separate, you've got your spill kits, all those kinds of things that are important to mitigating any kind of an emergency. Again, another outside area where people can eat and hang around. It also might be an area where some people who are not students could congregate. So you may need to keep an eye on some of those areas as well. Now, when you get we'll look at a few things that I think could need some improvement. And we talked pretty extensively about eye wash stations, but as you can see, this one's not quite up to par. It's not working well on one side. So when you see these kind of things, note them. But don't just simply write on there and then say, oh, well, good, we've got the documentation, and then not do anything about it. Go back and put in a work order and get something accomplished, and then go back and check on some of those things later on. Again, the storage issue, some things need to be stored. For some reason, there's kind of a phenomenon that if something's painted red and it's an emergency device, it attracts other things in front of it. So be looking for that. Don't let people put things in front of fire extinguishers or control panels and alarm systems and all those kind of things. So look for those things. Make sure that those areas are kept clear. Ventilation, as I said before, this one had pretty good ventilation, but if you can see, that intake is really clogged up with dust. Sometimes we don't look up when we're in places. So as you walk through, make sure you're looking for things like that too, because that'll help circulate that air, especially if it's in a chemistry lab. You've got to have that exchange of air so nobody gets sick or injured. This eye wash station probably isn't very accessible. Definitely not so to somebody who might be mobility impaired and in a wheelchair or something. So again, piling stuff in front of things. This one's more orange than red, but it's the same purpose. And when you're in some place with a water source, make sure that your electricity is far enough away from the water source, or make sure it's a GFCI, a ground fault circuit interrupter on it, so that if water ever contacted, it would immediately shut down. You can't always assume that they are just because they don't have the sticker on them. If the little button is there for resetting it, you may know that it's GFCI. But if not, get your electricians from there to look into it and verify it. You may have to put in a work order and get those changed out to be in the ground fault type outlets. And your hazards in your area, it's all unique. Here in Texas, flooding is huge for all of us. So that's probably one common thing. Unless you're way out in West Texas, you may have less flooding and more dust. Although when it does rain, there's nowhere for it to go. So every place has got its own hazards that they need to identify. Railroads, in the law, it talks about specifically about having, for at least school districts, you have to have a plan if there's a train. Well, a train derailment and hazardous material spill. Remember, we're talking about a multi-hazard emergency operations plan. So every hazard you have to identify and have a plan for. So whether it's specifically required or not, chemicals going up and down a railroad track is something you need to plan for. And don't forget that trucks that go down the front of all your roads and accesses to near your campuses all have probably the same chemicals, except there's a greater chance of those having some kind of hazardous material spill. So if anybody sees any of these, I'm sure you have plenty of these on your campus. They're all pipeline markers. It's important to know, are they active, whether they're gas, whether they're oil, whether they're gasoline, whatever type of materials are going through there, you should know it. There should be identifications on these signs and ways to call. We also have some pipeline safety information on our website, and feel free to use that information. It's very important that you know where those are located and have plans for how to mitigate any kind of a problem or disaster there. What about this? Anybody got any gang activity anywhere near one of your campuses? If whatever you have near your campus is usually on your campus. So if you're seeing signs like this, be aware that there are some gang activities. I would work with your local law enforcement and your local gang units to identify what those characteristics may be. It may be important for you for documentation and reporting purposes. We know we want to get this off the walls as soon as possible, but you also want to take pictures of them, document so that you can come back and you can share that with law enforcement. Traffic, always a challenge. So knowing where your students are coming from, where they're having to cross, and working with your local city planners and law enforcement to help the best you can with some of those traffic flow issues. Okay, and now we want to make sure that we're all aware that you can protect sensitive information. Texas Education Code 37108 tells you that except as provided by C2, the information that's collected, produced during a safety audit is not subject to disclosure under open records. That's important to know. Okay, so generally if somebody says, send me the results of your audits, and right now a lot of people want to know what folks' audits look like. You do not have to give that information, except. Okay, so here's the except. Under C2, it provides a list of 9 items that are related to the emergency operations plan that are subject to disclosure. The law kind of goes back and forth between talking about audits and emergency operations plans. I would say generally you don't want to give out specific information that could allow somebody to exploit one of your vulnerabilities. So you have to be very cautious about that. But those 9 items that are listed will be subject to disclosure. Okay? So some of those items are things like, do you have an emergency operations plan? You will have to be able to provide them with a document that shows you have one. Has it been reviewed in the last year? There's a number of different things. So please go on and look at 37108, specifically C2, because those are the things that you're less likely to be able to keep from open records. And some of them apply specifically to school districts, and some apply to both school districts and junior college districts. You can give your reports to your board in a closed session. So remember that. All this information to me is highly confidential. They should all be able to know that you have processes for dealing. If, let's say, you have a bomb threat and you have to move people to another location, but they shouldn't know where you're taking those people to at that point, or where your different options are. Keep those things available just for those who need to know, and you should be able to keep that information or redact that information before giving it to someone. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Joe McKenna, who's going to talk a little bit more about the reporting process, and then at the very end we'll be able to have you ask questions, and we'll go back and forth as needed.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. As Tom mentioned, I'm going to spend a little bit of time discussing the reporting aspect of the audit process. So although official reporting for junior college districts has not yet begun, we have started the process on our end. And the first step we take, and we began this in early February and it will go through the end of this month, we reach out to each of the 50 junior college districts. We reach out to the president's office and we ask 2 things. We ask the president's office to confirm contact information for the president or chancellor, who is under statute required to be involved in the audit process, but we also ask them to designate a specific individual if they will not be the person who is handling reporting. So as of this morning, we had about half of the college districts who had confirmed information. So if you all know that you might be that person who's going to be designated, you all are going to be the person handling the reporting. You might want to reach out to the president or chancellor's office, or a contact who might be able to reach out and just confirm that designation has been made. And it's important because the next step in the process in April, as Tom mentioned, early April, that first week of April, is when we're going to send out login information. And this is not only your link to access the reporting tool, but the specific password that's been assigned to the junior college district. And so that information is only going to go to the president or chancellor, or if they've designated someone, that individual will receive that login information to the JCAR tool as well. So as we discussed, the reporting tool opens in early April. At any point from April to September 15th of this year, you can submit your information. So as Tom mentioned, if your audits are complete and you're ready to submit that information, as soon as you have the login information in hand beginning in April, you can make that submission. You do not have to wait till September 15th or after August 31st. At any point after receipt of the login information, you are able to submit that information. But remember, the deadline is September 15th, which is the last day that you'd be able to submit any audit information to the School Safety Center. The JCAR tool is our, and I'll spend a little bit more time on the JCAR tool here in a minute, but the tool itself is our mechanism to collect the data. So submission is only allowed electronically. We do not receive any paper copies. If we receive a paper copy, we'll either send it back or contact you and shred it, but it will not count as a submission that we will use in the aggregate report that we prepare for the legislature and the public. We do allow you, and we certainly encourage this, and you'll be prompted and reminded several times throughout the tool. More specifically, as you get towards the end, after you complete the last question in the JCAR tool, you're going to be given a summary page. You're able to review that summary page, make sure everything is correct. If it's not, you're given the opportunity to go back into the report and make any changes. Once you're happy with the data that you've entered into the system, it will prompt you to print that page. That can serve as a copy of what you've submitted to the system. So again, you'll be prompted to do that on your review page. You'll also upon submission, once you pass that review page and you hit submit, you'll automatically be sent an email, and that's the email that you entered at the start of the tool. So make sure that email that you enter in question 1 is correct, because it's going to send you a copy of your responses to that email address. So as I mentioned, the JCAR tool is our method of collection. This is how we collect certain information. We do not collect we don't collect every piece of document that you use in the audit process. But what we do is collect a specific information that you should be able to respond to based upon the audits that you've conducted. And an important point is that completing the JCAR tool is not a substitute for conducting the audit. The audit and the reporting are two separate things. Conducting your audit is what Tom has spent most of the webinar discussing. What I'm focusing on now is the reporting. And so two different aspects, yet related. You should be able to use information that are from those more comprehensive audits of each facility to respond to the questions that we have in our JCAR tool. And then it's important that to remember that we're required by law on our end to use this audit information that we receive to produce an aggregate report. We don't use college district names, but we have to report how many districts did this or that or don't have something or have something. And we have to post that publicly on our website, and we also notify the legislature as to when that report has been completed and is ready for their view. One of the things that that you'll hear more of as we get into the reporting period is once we send you the link, we encourage you to access the tool. Even if you're not ready to submit at that point, we want you to go ahead and access the tool for two reasons. The first reason being that behind that login screen, you're going to get some more information in terms of the reporting process. There's going to be an information page. It's not going to take you right to the questions. It's going to give you some information on those first couple pages on the process, a lot of what we discussed today, but it's a central location where you can go and you're able to, see some important dates, some important information that we want you to know. The other important piece of information that is available is you're able to download in a PDF form the questions that are going to follow in the JCAR tool. So if you want to just start to prepare and to view some of those questions, those are downloadable and there for you. The second reason that we encourage you to access the link is we are able to see on our end when you've accessed the link. It's confirmation for us that you're not having any login issues, that the information was delivered to the appropriate person. When we don't see a tool opened, as we get closer to reporting deadline, we're going to reach out and we're going to confirm that someone has received the information. You can mitigate some of those phone calls from us or emails from us just by logging in, which tells us that someone has it, someone's aware of it, and that it's in process. So as I mentioned, we'll probably summer, mid to late summer, but for sure by late summer, we will reach out to districts with a phone call, probably with an email first, but certainly with a follow-up phone call after if we haven't seen any movement. And again, that's really just for us to make sure that there aren't any issues. We want to be there to support any potential issues that you might be having with login and be able to address any of those issues. And again, sometimes kind of going back to where I started the process, making sure that we have the right person on file that should be receiving this contact information, this login information, excuse me. So you can kind of help us now just by making sure that your president's office, your chancellor's office knows if you're going to be the one that has been designated to handle this, that you're on our list as well. As we get closer and closer to a submission, you'll see more and more contact from us, especially if that link hasn't been opened. As we get closer into August, even if it's still in process status, you still may get a phone call or email from us just confirming that everything is going okay, that you don't need any technical assistance from us, either on the specific audit end, but even on the reporting end as well, that there are no technical difficulties with the system or a specific question that may be confusing or needs some more elaboration from us. And as I said, we'll start with emails, but most likely as we get closer, we'll certainly start to reach out by phone just to make sure that we're, sometimes emails change, sometimes emails are incorrect. So we're going to reach out by phone as well as email to make sure that that information is correct and that's been received. And of course, our goal is, we want all 50 junior colleges to submit. Again, these are doing your audits and reporting are two different requirements in the law. So certainly if there's information in your audit that needs attention, that can be addressed, but making sure that you are able to report is certainly something that you want to do regardless of the information. You want to make sure that you have that submission into us. And again, everything's reported aggregately on our end in terms of the report. And so as things are identified, we're certainly here to support any changes beyond the audit process as well. And with that, we're going to move into question and answer, and I will turn it over to Cynthia to facilitate that. And if you have any specific questions, you can type them in the chat, and we'll be happy to address them.
At this time, we will open up the floor for questions, and as Dr. McKenna mentioned, please submit your questions in the chat box, and we will filter those questions appropriately. Thank you.
Also, while we're waiting for any questions that may come up, if you have a specific question or something that you want to talk about, the whole process or any of these, feel free to give us a call if you want to talk one-on-one for any items at all. It's not going to be limited to only today. We'll be happy to try to clarify some things we've said, but we're more than willing to help you at any time on any of your processes and things, or show you where to find things if you get stuck finding stuff on the website. Use that search feature as well. Put in a couple of the keywords, and that may help you get to some of the areas you like and need. But if not, don't feel bad about calling one of us and having you, and we'll help you get it to you, or maybe even send you the link directly. Whatever we can do to make that work.
I see we have one question coming in. Again, we do encourage you to take this opportunity to ask questions that you would like to have answered.
Well, it looks like, yeah, we got somebody typing, but it may be that either we just did a really, really good job of explaining all this, or we put you to sleep about 30 minutes or 45 minutes ago. So, you know, we'll hang in here because we're here for the long haul. So if there's anything y'all want to ask, we'll be more than happy to talk about it. Okay, we've got a good question here about does the audit cover the IT security section of the checklist? At this point, I would say no. There's not a lot in there about your security, your IT security systems. As we go forth in the next month and closer to the start of the next one, we are going to need to add a lot of that section to it. So we're always looking for, if you ever have a checklist or anything that you think are good, that's not too extensive. We recognize the need for IT security and cybersecurity challenges, but there isn't a lot in the current tool to assist you in that nature. Yes, another one is about the checklist. Part of those audit tools within that toolkit is a comprehensive checklist of facilities. Like I said, it's got some improvement we need to do. We're going to be revamping it a lot, but that's where the actual checklists are. And they usually, when the checklists are in the form of a positive statement, and we say, does your district have this, or does it, you have a positive statement if you say yes to it. But the little drop-down box gives you yes, no, not applicable, or not assessed. But feel free to modify those kind of things. But those toolkits the toolkit does include a checklist to look at a lot of those items.
Okay, seeing no more questions, like Tom said, we're certainly available in here. We'll provide some contact information. It's on our website certainly as well, so we're happy to, if you reach out and have any specific questions. One thing we wanted to mention, we certainly want your feedback on the webinar, how we can improve it, what we did well. So after the webinar ends, you'll receive an email and it will have a link to an evaluation on both the content as well as the speakers of the webinar. Once you complete that, we'd certainly appreciate that first. It does mean a lot to us in terms of gaining your feedback. But once that's completed, you'll be provided the link to be able to download this presentation, a copy of the handout that goes with the slides. So you'll be receiving that within the next day or so. So pay attention for that. And again, if you have any other questions, we're happy to take them at any time by phone or by email. Thank you all for joining.